Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over the Fibonacci retracements for the Grayscale trusts on the local and macro level. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so a lot of you guys are probably wondering why the Grayscale trusts are not going up as fast as I'm sure everybody would like. While I can't give you a definitive answer for that because I don't know, again, markets are basically um, a summation of all market psychology of all participants in the markets. So it's impossible to know the minds of everybody. That would be like saying that, I can read people's thoughts, but that's just not true. But what I can tell you guys is this, okay? I've kind of speculated on this before. It took me a while to think about this, to think about why it is that Bitcoin went up to all-time highs, but altcoins didn't really do much of anything, and we haven't really seen an alt season yet. I think there's two main reasons for that. Okay, number one, the pop in Bitcoin to 75K was not the actual bull run move that Bitcoin is going to have. It was basically just the market pricing in the spot ETFs. I can't say this for certain, but I kind of suspect that's what's going on. And the second reason is the money flow basically the crypto market waiting for the Fed to cut rates, because they probably already know, a lot of these whales in crypto probably already know that the Fed at some point has to cut rates. They don't have a choice. And so they're waiting for the crypto bull run to start, would be my guess. So basically, it pretty much, in my opinion, boils down to those two things: spot ETFs being priced in, but it's not the actual bull run itself, and the Fed rate cuts. Because as you guys know, when the Fed cuts rates, that $6 trillion that's sitting on the sidelines will progressively come in more and more and more into stocks and crypto. That's what I suspect is going to happen. So let's get into these fib levels. So I'm going to start with the LTCN. This is a pretty, I would say, a decent assumption to assume maybe the bottom is at this trend line, because again, this is a macro trend line. So I'll just measure it from there for LTCN. So the targets we have here is $82, $127, $170, and let's see here, roughly about $197. I guess we could possibly round that up and say 200, because it could always just wick right above that 4.236. I mean, it's lots of these candles have wicks on them. So if I were just to give you guys a potential estimate of, let's just say, you put $1,000 in. I'm not telling you what to do. You can do what you want with your own money. None of this is financial advice. I'll just use myself as an example. If I were to put in $1,000, let's say, if I were to divide 200 by the current price, which is $13, it'd be a little bit more than 15x. So you'd be looking at, or I guess in this case, I would be looking at roughly about $15,300. So a little bit more than a 15x return. I do want to point out here that the RSI is getting pretty down there. I don't know that it necessarily hits oversold before it starts moving back to the upside. I'm not sure how likely that is. But you guys can see, even on this little pop here that we had to $54, it really wasn't much of a move when you compare it to the previous all-time highs. This thing went up to 510. So now let's go ahead and measure that basically from the macro top here to the macro bottom. And this isn't necessarily hopium for you guys to be like, oh yeah, it's going to go to $2,000. I mean, it could go to $2,000. It could go to $5,000 or $10,000 or maybe only $500. Nobody knows. Okay. These are basically technical estimations. A Fibonacci retracement, what it's designed to do is it's designed to give a future price level either on the bullish or the bearish side. That's what it's designed to do. And some people, I personally don't use it for this, but some people use it as a retracement tool. So if, let's say that they were looking to get in, a lot of people refer to the 0.5 to the 0.618 as kind of the golden pocket. Let's say on maybe one of these moves, let's say it ripped up here to, let's say, the 0.786, and they say, okay, I want to get back in at roughly about the 0.5. So they get in here at the 0.5. Of course, it would have dipped a little bit more. I would actually have to show you guys this on a slightly smaller time frame. Let me actually see if I can. Okay. let me actually see if I can figure. You know what? I'm actually not going to use LTCN for this. I'm going to use Bitcoin for this. So let me see if I can maybe try to show you guys an example of why this would be considered a retracement tool. Um, let's say from the bottom or the top to the bottom here. Yeah, okay, this is not really a good example. So hold on one second. Okay, so we'll use like a trending move. This should actually work out a little bit more. So if I go from this top down to this bottom right here, you guys can see like how this 0.5 level kind of lines up perfectly with the bottom of this support zone, right? So a lot of people would be looking at something like that and saying, okay, well, the 0.5 lines up with the bottom of the support, so likely it's going to bounce, right? But then it didn't. We had that crazy flash crash. It probably actually would have held that level if it wasn't for that. But then, of course, we had that sneaky little flash crash, and then boom, it broke the 0.5, the golden pocket, came down, and then came back up pretty much after that. But a lot of people would have been looking for something like that to potentially use as a retracement tool to get into a position or out of a position, depends on which way you want to look at it. Again, I'm not really an expert on using the Fibonacci's for retracements. I've used them on occasion in day trading, but it's not really my go-to thing. It's kind of more of a I use it more of a measurement tool for potential future price targets. That's how we came up with the $170 price target for NVIDIA. That's actually the 1.618 on the NVIDIA chart. So, anyways, going over the retracements here. On the macro scale, you can see this is roughly about 840, 1330, 1860, and 20. Well, let's say roughly about 2150 is, I think, probably what the top is there. Now, assuming the most bullish case scenario, it goes all the way up to 2150. Of course, this would be absolutely bonkers. But then again, you guys got to remember, I showed you with Dogecoin that Dogecoin did like over a 700x. It went from 1/10 of a penny to 75 cents. So it is possible. Okay. 100x's or more in crypto is rare. It is rare, but it's possible. So let's just say $1,000 was the investment here. You'd see roughly about 165,000. That is absolutely a possibility. So now I'm going to go over BCHG. This is going to be the next one. And again, I can't guarantee it, but I suspect the next big wave up in the Grayscale trust is probably going to be once the Fed starts cutting rates. That would be my guess, because a lot of people are going to be looking at the interest rates that they're getting on their savings accounts and money markets and stuff like that, and they're going to be like, "Nah, I don't want this. I want to go somewhere else where the risk is better, or where the return is better." So local level here, 36, 54. 72 and 84. So if I go ahead and do 84 divided by the current price, which is 660, it's roughly about a 12.7x. So we can times that by 1,000. It'd be roughly about $12,700. When it comes to these big moves on the Fibonacci's, I'd be looking at probably, if it was me personally, I'd probably be looking at roughly about a 6-month time frame. So maybe, or I'm sorry, not 6 months, about 8-month time frame. So maybe sometime between now and next April, or maybe even now and next June, for these big potential moves here, or maybe even anywhere between now and the end of next year, because that's theoretically when the end of the bull run is supposed to take place. And usually what happens at the end of a bull run is Bitcoin has already topped well before the end of the run, usually is how this goes, and then money flows from Bitcoin into Ethereum and alts. Altcoins are usually the last ones to pop off. So usually when we see an end to the bull market, or we're about to see an end to the bull market, you usually see things like celebrities coming out and talking about how they're supporting this or that crypto. And you'll see all these super micro caps just doing stupid gains. Like, your average large cap gain would be like 10, 20x. You'll see like 100, 200% gainers in a single week. Micro caps will do like 50, 70, 80, 100x. usually that's a pretty strong signal that we're getting pretty close to the end of the bull run. So BCHG here, we got 98, 157, 217, and roughly about 250. I'll just call that one 255. So we'll divide this again by 660. You can see it's a pretty large gain, so roughly a 38.5x, 38,600 on this one. All right, so HZen, this is still within a falling wedge, which generally speaking has a higher probability of a break to the upside. Again, the target is the top of the wedge. So we're looking at roughly about 15.5, 24 and a quarter, 32 and a quarter, and roughly about 37 as potential targets here. So we got 37 divided by, let's say, 296. I could just say $3, make it easy, but some people out there love precision. They want to be exact details and stuff, right? So 12.5x here. Again, $1,000 invested, that'd be roughly about 12,500. All right, so HZen unfortunately did not have an entire bull run that we can go off of. This thing kind of came out late cycle. As you guys can see all the way back here during October 2021, that was like 2 months before the end of the bull run. So we got limited data to work with here. So for this one, we're looking at 48, 79, 107, and roughly about 126 respectively. So if I do 126 divided by the current price, which it looks like, yeah, it looks like the current price is 296. I was trying to see if that was aftermarket because the price is showing up the same as the price for the 51 EMA. As you can see, these numbers over here are representative of the EMAs over here. So yeah, that was a little confusing, but anyways, so we divide this, you can see it's a 42.5x. I mean, again, at this point, you'd be looking at roughly about $42,500, so pretty good. I don't know anybody that's going to complain about that, even post-tax. That's actually quite good. All right, so ETCG, assuming that this little V-shaped recovery here was the bottom, we're looking at roughly 26.6. Again, you can see the 2.618, 3.618 lining up perfectly with this resistance here. This is what I'm talking about when I say retracements. I mean, it's not exactly a retracement, but you get the idea here. Usually when traders look for retracements with the fibs, they look for it in confluence with something else. That's usually how it goes. So 40, you have 51, and then roughly about 60. So we'll do 60 divided by 10.5. This one's not going to be as significant because, again, generally speaking, Ethereum doesn't really move up as much as the altcoins, so you're not really going to get, at least I would think, you're not going to get as big of a return as you would as, some of these other Grayscale trusts that are basically altcoin specific. So you'd be looking at 5,700 on this one. Again, that's just on a relatively modest $1,000 investment. So the macro scale, this one's much larger and more ridiculous looking. So 156, 250, 343, and 400. But I mean, again, this is crypto, y'all. It is the fastest horse in the race, but it's also the most risky. I mean, if you just jump in at any price, there's a chance you could get wrecked. So not financial advice, but it may... I'll just put it to y'all like this. I spent an entire 4-year cycle studying the crypto space just so I could kind of attempt to gain an edge over the market, so to speak. So 37.7x here, times that by 1,000, 37,700. So ETH-E, we already know about the gap. So in my opinion, just based on the gap alone, it is likely to get filled, and which basically that means the price eventually has to go back up. If I actually show you guys this gap, this is interesting. So you can see on the bullish retracement here, the gap does actually sit perfectly, almost perfectly between the 0.236 and the 0.382. Once again, that's another lineup of a retracement. So 1.618, roughly about $49. 2.618, 67. 3.618, roughly about, we'll just call that 85 and then 96 respectively. So once again, this is Ethereum based, so the returns are not going to be that large. I'd be looking for the macro level ones for the bigger returns. But even then, I expect that the returns are not going to be as good as the alt based ones. So 4,125, that's not bad. Let's take a look at the macro size. This one's not going to be much larger because, again, this trust came out quite late in the cycle. So, or I shouldn't be saying quite late in the cycle. What am I saying? So June 2019, that was when Bitcoin had that little tiny bull run, and then it kind of pulled back into the end of the year. So it was more or less in a bear market during that time, but it didn't really experience like a full bear market until we got all the way over here. So anyways, so if I were just to measure this, we'd be looking at roughly about 109, 168, 233, and roughly about 275 respectively. The other thing I want to point out here is that the fact that the spot Ether ETFs are being traded, which means it has gained institutional adoption, could actually push the price of these Bitcoin-related Bitcoin oscillators and ETH-related and ETH oscillators to much higher highs than even what these maximum macro fibs are telling us they could go to. Because again, we don't know how much money is going to flow in from institutions to push up the price of these. We just don't know. So roughly about a 12x on this one. And you can see it's $11,950 on that one. Okay, so Phil G. I do still suspect Filecoin and Phil G, File G, whatever you want to call it, does have some pretty massive upside here. So again, this is a DPIN project. DPIN, in my opinion, not financial advice, not guaranteed, but in my opinion, is going to be a major. It's going to be a major theme in crypto in the bull market that's coming up. So 218, 335, 458, and roughly about 535 respectively. So you can see already on the smaller scale that this thing actually has a greater return than the macro scale on the ETH ones. Again, that's just the way crypto works. Okay, the smaller the market cap, the larger the gain. Typically is how this works. So don't be surprised. Again, I'm not saying this is a guarantee. I don't know if this is going to happen, but if it does happen, don't be surprised that the gains on these alt-related trusts are bigger than that on the ETH ones. So 38 or 13,000 here on ETH. Now, if I'm going over the macro size ones, let's see where that low is. There it is right there. So we have roughly about $630, $1,000, $1,385, and $1,620. So 1,620 divided by 41, you'd be looking at roughly about a 39.5x on this one. So pretty large return there. I mean, a 40x is huge. So 39,510. Now going over GBAT. Excuse me. So the levels we're looking at here is roughly about 31, 48, 64, and 74 respectively. So top fib level here, you're looking at roughly about a 12.3x. I mean, again, I think that's absolutely possible. I think that's probably even conservative. So roughly about 12,300. Now to give you guys the macro size one, we'd be looking at roughly about 52, 80, 106, and 125 respectively. So this is much larger, but then again, I mean, this is a relatively small size altcoin in the native space. So it wouldn't surprise me if this happened. Roughly about a 20.8x here. So 20,800 on that one. GLIV. Okay, so we'll take wick high to wick low. That's usually how we do this, or in the opposite direction, wick low to wick high. If you're doing the bearish version, so 74 to 110, 147, and then roughly about we'll call that 170 respectively. So it's pretty much just going to come out exactly to a 10x. So you'd be looking at roughly about 10,000 on this on a $1,000 investment. Okay, so the macro one, we got 120, 185, 250, and roughly about 290 respectively. For this one, it'd be roughly about a 17x, so you'd be looking at a little bit over 17,000. Again, that's not bad. G-Link, I know Chainlink is a very popular one, and it was in the last cycle, and it probably will be again in this cycle. I wouldn't be surprised. So I suspect this one's going to have quite a bit of upside. Okay, so local, we're looking at roughly about, let's see, 218, 333, roughly about 450-ish and 522 respectively. So 522 divided by 55, you're looking at roughly about a 9.5x. It's roughly about $9,500, so that's not bad. Now the macro scale one, this one's much bigger. That's what she said, haha. So 340, 540, 730, and then roughly about 850 respectively. Okay, so 850 divided by 55, roughly about a 16x. So basically $16,000 on a $1,000 investment. If you put in 10,000, it'd be 160,000. But just understand that there's no guarantees in trading and investing. It could do a 16x, or it could only do like a 5x. We simply won't know until we know. So Solana, this one's already at all-time highs. So I'm just going to measure this at the local level because the other ones we measure it based on whether it's actually hit the all-time high or not. In this case, it has. So 760, 1060, 1330, and then roughly about 1520 respectively. So 1520 divided by the current price, 417, we'll just call it 3.64x. So I mean, yeah, I mean it could go a lot higher, sure, but I mean that's the maximum target I can give you guys right now. And like I said before, GSOL has been heavily elevated. If I were just to show you guys this, if it dropped down to even the level that I've been talking about for eons with you guys, down at this 170, that would be a 71% drop compared to if I go to GBAT, the level that we're talking about on GBAT. I mean, this thing would barely have to move at all, literally barely at all, to get down to that support. So about 20%. GXLM, yeah, this one's a little tricky. So we're just going to go with this first wick high here down to the bottom of this wick red candle here. So 64, 94, 122, and 140 respectively. So 140 divided by, it looks like GXLM is exactly at $20. Easy math. So roughly about a 7x, $7,000. And if I were just to, do this from the macro high to the macro low, because GXLM hasn't actually hit new all-time highs yet, not this cycle anyways. So let's see, 152, 245, 335, and 390 respectively. So let's see, 390 divided by 20, you're looking at roughly about a 19.5x. That's a great return as far as I'm concerned. I would be very happy with that, me personally. So 19,500 here. So now we got Mana. All right, so same thing. This one actually looks quite similar to GXLM in terms of the top and the bottom here. So local level 54, 80, roughly about 110 and 126 respectively. So 126 divided by, we'll just call this 1250, roughly about a 10x. So you get just over, so you get just over, basically over, a little over 10,000 on this one with the $1,000 investment. Now, obviously, if you're super rich and you have like millions and millions of dollars, and you can just throw in like 20 or 50 or 100,000 and not even think twice about it, then you're doing much better than most of us. So you can definitely afford to take the risk. Not financial advice, of course. Everybody can always do what they want to with their own money. So 112, 175, 243, and roughly about 280 here on the macros. So 280 divided by 12.5 here. On mana, I do think mana is going to be a big one in this bull run because the metaverse is probably going to come back to life, would be my guess. So roughly about a 22x here, 22,400 on mana. And last but certainly not least, Zcash. So just going from this recent wick high down to the recent wick low. These are still pretty good returns as far as I'm concerned because Zcash is quite cheap right now. So 9, 1270, 1650, and roughly about 1870 respectively. So divide this by 490 times 1,000. 3,800 bucks. I mean, that's not bad. If you could double your money, let's say 5 more times after that, I mean, you would obviously have a lot of money, right? The power of compounding. So now we'll go from the swing high to the swing low here. This was pretty much right towards the end of the previous bull run top. So we don't really know what the true potential of this thing it will be during this cycle. But the levels here are roughly about 64, 101, 140, and 163 respectively. So 163 divided by 490 comes out to about a 33x, which is possible. I mean, Zcash doesn't, generally speaking, doesn't really tend to move very much during the bull market. Not as much as some newer altcoins, but anything's possible here. So 33,200. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.